Um, okay, so let me get my head together here. Howdy and welcome to this event for theater in our schools for the American Alliance for Theater and Education. My name is indeed Jonathan Jones, and I am joining you from New York City in my office at NYU Steinhardt, where I am on faculty and a graduate advisor, both for master's students and doctoral students. But I also am the chair-elect for the board of AATE. And I'm really grateful that you were able to join us tonight. We will begin with land acknowledgement, as we often do. This land acknowledgement comes from Adrian Wong from the Spiderweb Show in Ontario. Since our activities are shared digitally to the internet, let's take a moment to consider the legacy of colonization embedded within the technologies, structure, and ways of thinking we use every day. We're using equipment and high-speed internet not available in many Indigenous communities, and even the technologies that are central to much of the art we make leave significant carbon footprints, contributing to changing climates that disproportionately affect Indigenous peoples worldwide. I invite you to join me in acknowledging all this, as well as our shared responsibility to make good of this allyship, and for each of us to consider our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship. And if you'd like to read more about the importance of land acknowledgements, you can visit this website, and I'll post that in the chat if I can figure out where the chat is. There it is. And there's also a link that allows you to find out the native land that you're on if you're not familiar. But if you do know where you are, if you want to just post that in the chat where you're joining us from. I mentioned that I am in New York City, and this is the former ancestral and unceded lands of the Lenape people. But feel free to post that in the chat. I have so many thoughts. I just actually come out of a class teaching about student engagement and utilizing rigorous academic talk and making accommodations and modifications for students with various learning needs and for E&L students. So my mind is swimming in all of the things, and I am so grateful that you are with us tonight. I am going to share here a series of links. You don't actually need to open any of them at the moment, but if it's useful for you to have them, I'm just sharing them with you. The first is a Google Doc that is currently open to editing by anyone who has the link. And we're going to be using that document as we move through the session this evening. The second document is like a handout, I guess, that I've used with my students in the past that gives some overview of this framework that I'm speaking about tonight, the gradual release of responsibility. And a lot of the information that's in the slides is pulled from that handout. But if that's helpful for you to have as a resource later, then you may. And also there is a link to the 2 hour ago version of this slideshow. So if that is helpful for you to refer to on your own, that's a PDF of what we're covering. My intention for the night is to start out with some goal setting, as I often do, and we'll be using a KWL form to achieve that. And then we're going to have a brief overview of the gradual release of responsibility framework. And then we're going to talk about two specific aspects of it, focused instruction and guided instruction. And I always overplan, so inevitably we'll get as far with that as we will. And we'll try to have some reflection time at the end if we arrive there. I do want you to know, if you're not familiar, that this framework is based in work that Douglas Fisher and Nancy Frey have created. And it's a curriculum framework that can be used for any content area. And my sense, having worked with drama teachers for 20 years at this point, is that many drama teachers are not aware that these kinds of curriculum frameworks exist, or if they are, they're not necessarily employing them. And before I was working here at NYU, I was a high school teacher for 5 years, teaching English and theater. And because of my experience teaching English as well as theater, a lot of like my general pedagogy or pedagogical knowledge, I have adopted into my drama teaching as well. And with the pre-service theater teachers that I work with here at NYU, I think, and based on conversations I was just having 45 minutes ago with folks, my sense is that utilizing this approach can be quite helpful for students, particularly in public schools. So that's where I'm coming from, and I'm glad that you're here on this journey with us. In terms of goal setting, I do want you just to reflect on what you know about structuring drama lessons or drama curriculum and what you want to know about structuring drama lessons or drama curriculum. So this is that first document. I'll pop it in the chat again. And at the beginning here, we have this KWL, scaffolding a learning experience using the gradual release of responsibility framework. And so I asked there, what did you know about developing drama curriculum? And then what did you want to know about developing drama curriculum? You can just get into the form and you can add whatever you would like to these bullets here in these first two columns, K and W. What do you already know about sort of developing, creating curriculum for drama? And what do you want to know? And we'll sort of start there. I'll just hold. If you're not able to access the document, or if you're on your phone, so it's very small, and you want to type things in the chat, I can add them into the Google Doc if that's helpful. Right, I'm going to add another layer to the W column. So I asked what you wanted to know about creating drama curriculum, but also like why you came here tonight, what you're hoping for. That would be fine to include in that middle column there, W. I'm just going to read through some of these here. Always start with an objective and a goal for students to achieve. What should they know by the end of the lesson? Include visual and auditory instructions to make lessons accessible. National Core Art Standards are a good place to start, in my opinion. I agree. UBD and UDL, UDL Universal Design for Learning, sure. State standards. Leaving time for reflection and feedback, creating opportunities for movement. Often theater is the only place they get to be active in a school day outside of phys ed, sure. Warm-ups and group exercises, games, including SEL, social emotional learning, and trauma-informed learning practices. Trauma-informed learning practices are my next learning objective myself. I want to learn more about that. Rubrics can be challenging to use. The columns need to be more than just always, sometimes, rarely, and never. I love it. I love it. I do have a book coming out on December the 1st, Assessment in the Drama Classroom. That might be a resource to look to. Differentiating, sure. Things we want to know. How to create engaging lesson plans for children ages 3 to 12. I hope that we'll get there. How to create a curriculum for students with special needs. Sure. It's part of why this framework, I think, is really helpful and useful. And I'll talk about that as we go along. How to release responsibility and still be able to have the grades needed for the classes to be considered legitimate by the administration. I love it. How to troubleshoot with students while keeping the train lesson moving. You bet. Curious about the gradual release aspect. What guardrails do students need? It's a great question. Specific language that can be helpful for instruction. Sure, it's part of what we'll do. And how do I help my students take ownership over time management? Oh, I love that. I love that. So going back to my document here, the gradual release of responsibility, as I mentioned before, is an approach for curriculum across content areas. And it's sort of arranged into these 4 categories of instructional moments that will happen. Could be within an individual lesson, but might also be over something more long-term. So in a unit of study or over the course of a residency, perhaps, that at different moments, there will be times when the teacher, the facilitator, the teaching artist is going to be doing some moments of what's called focused instruction, some moments of what's called guided instruction, some moments of collaborative learning, and some moments of independent learning. And so we're going to be unpacking those as we go along, and we're going to spend more time on some than others, as I'll explain. But sort of looking at this visually, the idea is moving from teacher responsibility to student responsibility. And that if I am introducing a concept to students that they may have limited awareness of or familiarity with, or perhaps none, because depending on what the material is that we're bringing to students when we're doing drama, sometimes they are things that the students might not have had access to before, that the teacher is going to be demonstrating for the folks what that thing is, how it works, or creating space to model and demonstrate material for the students that is then going to be able to sort of show them a way in, so that over time, we're able to partner with them through this guided instruction moment that we're doing it kind of together, the teacher engaged with the students, and then pushing towards what they're defining as collaborative learning, that the students are working in groups and doing the work, and then that subsequently they would do independent learning, which is that they're able to do things on their own. Let me just think about how I organized my document here. Looking at the lower level of that, okay, so when the students are doing the work either in groups or on their own, I'm choosing to spend the least amount of time talking about this tonight because my sense is that most of the stuff that happens in a drama class is collaborative in nature, because theater is a collaborative art form. So the fact that we're going to have some kind of group work or otherwise, where the students are working together, the teacher might be serving as a director or a coach, or they're just sort of giving the students instructions and the students are getting on with it, whatever the it is, that they're engaged in the activity, that is very much, from my point of view, a lot of what happens in drama. So I don't need to tell you about that. We could talk more about that, but that is not like the crisis moment that I feel like I need to be addressing, which is sort of pushing the teacher and facilitator to take a more active role at the outset when introducing content to students. At the bottom of this, of course, this idea of independent learning. Independent learning is often absent from drama classes because of the fact that drama is collaborative. And so, like, how am I going to get the student to put a play on by themselves? I might, but often that's not the case. And so depending on the work that we're asking students to do, we just have to be thinking differently about what independent learning is because of the nature of our content area. This isn't like you're going to do the math test on your own or write the essay for English, because that often is not what we're going to do in drama. And so just to be mindful that when a student is doing some kind of journaling, sometimes essay writing, because sometimes we do that in drama, but that those things are things that students are doing on their own. And so if they're doing some sort of reading of text, designing, drafting, working on projects, sometimes there are solo performances or presentations that we ask students to do. So there are moments where students might be doing things alone, and that's fine. But sometimes the work that we're doing, just it doesn't lend itself to that, and that's okay. Are there questions about that before I go on? Because I'm always mindful that I don't leave time for questions. So let's dig into these two bits that I want to focus on, which are focused instruction and guided instruction. And so how these are sort of listed out here, these are the sort of 8 concepts that we're going to be talking about tonight. And we'll sort of take them one at a time. I'll give an explanation of what these things are. I'll give some kind of example or model, and then we'll return to that Google document, and we'll be doing some additional activity there as we move through. But starting with focused instruction and these 4 parts of it, the idea is that the teacher is doing all of the heavy lifting in these moments. And this is happening through 4 different phases here: establishing purpose, engaging in modeling or demonstrations, implementing a think aloud, and utilizing what's called noticing. So we'll talk about each of those individually. Establishing purpose, as we saw in the KWL, somebody mentioned what they know about drama, that you want to have some kind of learning objective, or otherwise that you are clear about what it is that you're wanting the students to know or be able to do as a result of participating in that learning experience. And the purpose in this framework is the same thing, essentially. It's just that it's something that you're going to be communicating to the students. So whatever that a purpose is going to be in this framework, it's always going to be in student-friendly language and something that will be meaningful to them. It says here, students need to be involved in the process of establishing purpose. And that's to say that when we're sort of setting it out, it's not just the teacher telling the people, this is what we're going to be doing, but it's perhaps asking them to think about that idea. It's asking them to engage with that idea in some kind of way, in the most sort of pedestrian moment. Maybe they're copying it down into their drama journal. I don't know. People do different things in different drama classes. I'm sort of fine with whatever it is you decide, but the idea is that they're interacting with it in some kind of way, and that we're going to have some kind of conversation about why it is that we're engaged in that. And here in Fisher and Frey, they talk about you may have different reasons for doing something, and that they can be related to content. So what is it that we're learning about drama or theater? We could have a language purpose. So what we're learning about reading, writing, listening, or speaking as a result of doing this drama work, which depending on where one is doing this work, that might be something that you're required to do or something that you're interested in doing. And of course, and this again was in the KWL, this idea of social emotional learning. So we could have a social aspect that we want to have the students thinking about and developing as we engage in our drama practices. I give here a suggestion that this could be connected to the Castell framework of social emotional learning. So they talk about self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. But it could also just be more general sort of understandings of socialization, that students are going to be able to communicate, that they're going to be able to collaborate, they're going to be able to take turns, whatever that those kinds of things are that you might want to be developing with the young people. And so just as examples here, if I was doing a unit on improvisation, and this is work that I developed for upper middle school and high school students, that these could be some examples of purpose statements. So content-wise, if we're doing improvisation, we might want students to balance leadership and collaboration as we develop and share artistic ideas. And that language comes out of the core art standards. If we had a language purpose, we could be investigating theatrical terminology, which can apply to other content, and effectively communicate our ideas to our peers. And when we're thinking about theatrical terminology and improvisation, yes, and commit to your choice, that kind of thing, yeah. And then if we had social goals that we want to accomplish, so the purpose there, developing collaboration skills and an appropriate level of independence. So what I want to do is go back into that Google document, and if we scroll down, you'll see that there's a page that says purpose practice. If you were developing a purpose statement for some element of drama that you teach, what would it be? What will we be able to do as a result of experiencing this lesson or unit of study? So my example that I just shared with you about improvisation, I've just copied that into this document so you see how that's laid out. And just thinking about what you do with students. Are you devising theater with students? Are you doing forum theater with them? Are you doing pantomime? I don't know what. But whatever it is, if you could just get a row for yourself, list out what what that content area is, or that drama domain is that you're working within, however that you define that, what the concept is that you're focusing on. And then to just sort of play around with a content objective, what you want them to learn or achieve or be able to do in drama that's in student-friendly language, which is going to vary depending on the age group that you work with, a language purpose statement, or a social purpose statement. You don't need to put them all, but just thinking about what the work is that you do with the students and what makes sense. Okay. And if you have questions about that, feel free to unmute and ask, or post a question in the chat and I'll respond. But otherwise, you can just type into the document. So I've mentioned that the language that we're using in these purpose statements should be kid-friendly. We often describe these kinds of things as, so in student language. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have to know what all of those ideas are or what all of those terms mean, because that can be part of our work, in that unit of study is learning this new theater terminology. And so we have to allow space for that. And that I mentioned before, that we want to have some kind of interactive element so that this is being established together. We might be having conversations with students as we're talking about this purpose, in terms of, well, what did we do before? Or what have they done in other art forms, or in their lives, or in school, or wherever? What is their prior experience with drama? And then more specifically with this content area that we're focusing on here, this facet of drama work that we're focusing on. And so that we're able to sort of help the students to make connections to some of the things that we're going to be learning about in the forthcoming lesson, unit, residency, whatever it might be. And if it is even having a discussion with them about, okay, what are the terms here that are new, that are unfamiliar? Terms that we think we might know, but we don't know what they mean. If we're talking about puppetry, what is that thing? And so having that dialogue so that students are starting to just familiarize themselves with these expectations, and that will come back to it. We'll come back to this purpose as we're moving through the lesson, as we're moving through the unit, the residency, whatever it is, that it's always with us. That this is what we're focusing on, and we're mindful of when we've gotten away from the purpose. Maybe the purpose shifts as a result of some of the experiences that we're having together, and sometimes that might be the case. That might be the case. So just being open to that possibility as well. Reading scripts, collaborating and exploring, movement practices connects to working in a team, building confidence, understanding the different ways a monologue can be interpreted and performed, building a vocabulary to articulate what particular parts of the face or body are used to express an emotion and how those parts of the body are used. Oh, we're going to be doing some of that very soon. identifying character goals and exploring tactics or actions, sure, exploring obstacles to reach that character goal, using specific acting skills and structures. I mentioned before that I have this assessment book that's coming out. And one of the things that I talk about in the book, there are some folks who are like on a mission to frame drama teaching, that we're only going to learn about these specific things, these key ideas. And I think it's wonderful that some people are on that mission in their life. I am not on that mission. There is so much to do in drama, so many ways to approach drama work, so many entry points that students can have. We had a question before, how are we going to create things that are engaging for the students? I'm going to find out who those humans are in the room with me and find out what kinds of things that they like, what kinds of things that they're interested in. I'm going to find the elements of drama that resonate with those human beings in the room, if I have the time and space to be able to do that. I mean, that is like my overarching long-term goal in life always, is to figure out who am I working with and what do they need. Sometimes I have more opportunities to figure that out, and sometimes less, particularly if I'm doing something that's very short term. But whatever that I can do to try to figure out who the people are and what they need, what they're interested in, what they like, and how I can achieve those things, that is always going to sort of push me as I'm making decisions about what to teach and what to cover. All of that to say that indeed in my assessment book, I do talk about that the content can be anything, and just you need to be secure about what it is that you're doing. And here with this purpose statement, when we're thinking about this this framework, you've got to be able to articulate that and make that clear to the young people. Okay, I'm going to go back into my PowerPoint here. The next element after establishing the purpose is to use models and demonstrations. And that is terminology that you might be familiar with. Modeling as an instructional move used when a lesson addresses a cognitive process. And demonstrations or demonstrating is what a teacher does when we're focusing on physical tasks. And here, some features of modeling and demonstrating. It's not always there, but can be. That we're naming the strategy, skill, or task, what it is that you're trying to do, stating the purpose of that strategy, skill, or task, explaining when the strategy or skill is used, using analogies to link prior knowledge to new learning, demonstrating how the skill, strategy, or task is completed, and then alerting learners about errors to avoid, and assessing the use of the skill. Now, having worked with many drama teachers over the last 20 years, I know that in arts teaching, there can sometimes be a hesitation to give students a model or to demonstrate something for them, because sometimes there's a feeling that in artwork, if students are given a model, then they're just going to copy the model. And because it's artwork, it's creative, I want them to express their own ideas. I don't want to give them a model, because then they're just going to copy what somebody else did. And when we had the what people know and what they want to know at the beginning in the KWL, and that folks were asking about like what's going to engage learners or how to sort of attend to the needs of various populations of students. The thing is, when you're not giving students a model or demonstrating something for them, for some students, they have no idea what you're talking about when you give them instructions, of course. They might not be able to visualize that or imagine that just based on the words that you've given them, because they might have auditory processing disorders or who knows what that they're navigating. And so if you decide to not give a model or not show a demonstration, you're leaving those young people out. And more, when we're doing something, even in a creative art form, doing it like the model might be as much as I can do right now. I think about in a visual art class, when you're learning about perspective. And so you have like, okay, like the thing is disappearing into the distance. I guess that's the other way. I'm coming this way, further away. You know, further away, the things are smaller. When they're closer, they're bigger. Perspective. And when an art teacher explains that to a young person, what are you talking about? I need to see what that is in order to be able to even like wrap my head around the words. And now I'm going to have to do it. And so the art class does their perspective drawings, and then the art teacher, they hang them all up. We've got 20 different versions of that same cityscape. Perhaps you've seen that in schools because it exists. That's okay. It's a new concept. The students aren't familiar with that. once they've sort of wrapped their heads around what that is, and it's like, oh yeah, of course I've seen that, because I see it in video games, because I see it in movies and TV, because I see it at the theater when like everything is at an angle, and why is the set shaped like that? Because it's trying to show what's closer and what's further away sometimes. Sometimes it's just sort of random and it's about perspective or different points of view. But here, when we're talking about perspective in that sense, it means something very specific. And so showing folks a model of that can be really useful. I was going to have a picture of that at this moment because it would have been a good model for what I'm trying to describe, but I don't have it at the moment. Certainly in drama, if we're doing our puppetry, we show them a little bit of puppetry. If we're doing improvisation, we show them a little bit of improvisation. We talk about what's going on there. And maybe, as I say, for some young people, just recreate it. For some older people, it doesn't matter. Just recreating that thing is as much as they're going to do. And for other folks, they'll be able to move beyond that model. And that's okay. We can have room for all of that when we're doing artistic work. That aside, then, we have this idea of a think aloud. And this might be something that you're familiar with, might be something you've never heard of before, or really curious about how or why you would do this in drama. The teacher demonstrating the kind of thinking required to solve a problem, understand a set of directions, or interact with a text. So the teacher would use I statements to talk through how the teacher is receiving information, making sense of it, and responding. The teacher might also ask students to engage in think alouds as a formative assessment. So that's sort of checking for understanding so that students are able to articulate what it is that they're thinking. If we were in a math class and we were given a math problem to solve, and then the teacher says, show your work. This is verbalizing our work, okay? So I want to skip ahead because I need to actually do this because I'm talking about it and it makes me nervous. And I'll come back to noticing later. So modeling, demonstration, think aloud, and we're going to do a little bit of this with some Tableau. And for the Tableau that we're going to do, which is just going to be in your Zoom box on your own, and it will be silent, but just to explore this as we go through, our Tableau are going to have 3 criteria that we're working towards: facial expression, gesture, and gaze. Okay, Tableau as a frozen picture. So it will just be you in stillness, and the tableaus that we're going to create are going to involve facial expression, gesture, and gaze. And so what do I mean by those terms? So facial expression as what we do with our face, okay? Gesture as what we do with our body, and then gaze where our eyes are focused, okay? And so we'll just have some play with this. But first, a demonstration, a model. If I was to ask you to show me a tableau of horrified, so with facial expression, gesture, and gaze, what would that look like? On the count of 3, show me horrified. 1, 2, 3. Fabulous. It's working just as well as it did 2 hours ago in my class. Thank you. Relax. Okay. So here we have an image of an actor doing horrified. We see something happening sort of facially. We have this open mouth, and that we're giving this sort of moment here with this kind of emoji or some such that's showing this open mouth. And so the actor is doing that. Teeth showing, okay? That more than that, there's this squishing of the eyes and the forehead all happening together, and all of that giving some horror in the face. Gestures, so we're bringing the body into it. So we see the hands there at the head. And then this idea of gaze, which is quite interesting here. The face is looking downwards, okay? But also because the eyes are closed, it's not wanting to see. Okay, so the gaze is a closed gaze, and that we're so overwhelmed, so don't want to have that image, that idea perhaps in our head, because we've got the hands by our head, then we are showing horror in that way. Okay? Now, if I was asking you to do eavesdropping, here's what a think aloud is going to look like, or sound like, I guess, if I'm the instructor, the facilitator, the teacher, and I am going to talk to the people about how I'm doing this, okay? So eavesdropping, I know that that word means listening to a conversation or something happening in another place that I'm not supposed to be hearing. So I'm kind of listening in on something I'm not supposed to know about. So if I'm going to do this with my body and I've got to focus on facial expression, gesture, and gaze, then I'm going to think facial expression, what is my face going to do? So I'm going to have to move my head already, because if I'm listening in, I want to have my ear happening there. And then I'm thinking about my face. I'm thinking about what I'm hearing. I'm listening. I'm focusing. I'm intent. I'm going to raise my eyebrows. I'm going to perhaps purse my lips because I'm really taking that in. Okay. And then what the hell is I supposed to be doing? Gesture. Okay. So I'm going to do this because we have decided in American culture that when we put a hand by our ear, that means we're listening to something. Okay, I'm doing that. And then what's the other thing is gaze. And I'm thinking. And when I think, I look up. So I'm looking up and I'm pursing the lips and it's all happening. And this is my tableau of eavesdropping. And so that is the think aloud. That I'm talking through every step of what I'm doing with my body, what I'm thinking about, all of it. I am saying it out loud. Now, of course, before I asked you to make a tableau of, where were we, horrified, and I said 3, 2, 1, and you did it. But all of those things are still happening. You're just doing them automatically because you're a theater person and you're used to doing it. Here, I'm just making it clear that all of those things are part of what I'm taking into account when I'm making my decision to do this. And of course, this is like dorky example to me because it's so simple. I'm asking people just to do something with face and gesture and gaze. It's not much. But imagine that I didn't know any of that before. Then it could be quite meaningful to someone to know those steps. Or of course, if what I'm asking the folks to do is more complex, then hearing more of what I, as a theater person, have to think about and go through in order to accomplish that thing, that could be quite meaningful to folks. So let us do a practice version of that, okay? So our new word is shocked. I want you, with your microphone still on mute here, I want you just to do it yourself in your place, to talk through the think aloud, referencing the criteria, what it is that needs to be included, and what it is that you're doing sort of in all of the physical moves in order to accomplish a shocked tableau. Okay, so I'll just give you a moment to do that. As you're working, when I share the recording, you'll only see me at this moment. But if you want to turn your camera off, that's okay. Now, when I did this in my class 2 hours ago, I then asked if there was a volunteer who was willing to share their think aloud with everybody else. Is there someone who would be willing to share your think aloud with the other folks? Jen, thank you.
All right, sorry, had to figure out how to unmute.
No worries.
All right, so we are going to do a tableau and our emotion is shocked. So we're going to start with our facial expression. When I'm shocked, I always notice it comes from a breath, so my mouth gets wide and my face, often my eyebrows go down. So I've got with a scrunched forehead, eyebrows, big mouth, right here. And then my hands, depending on what I'm seeing, could go a lot of different places, but right now I'm feeling like they're going to go on my face like this. So now it's wide mouth, scrunched brows, face up to the cheeks. And then we have to think about where we're gazing. And when I'm shocked, I feel like I can't take my eyes off of that thing. So right now I'm pretending it's happening right in front of me. and my gaze is straight ahead, looking at whatever that very shocking moment is that just happened.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen. I noticed while you were doing that, that you were attending to, like, when you experience this in your life outside of this moment when you're creating this thing. And I realized as you were doing it, because you did it a couple of times where you went there, I thought, oh, I did that too. I hadn't intended to do it. And so I didn't think I did do it. And then I thought, oh, but that's what we should do, because we want to be getting the folks to make connections to this work outside of this moment and to be drawing upon their whole repertoire of experience, their lives, and to be including that as part of what we're doing here. So I was attentive to that as you were doing it. All right. So that's the think aloud, and figuring out, okay, we can have a model and show the people like what the thing looks like, but then also that we can speak what is going on in our mind, how we are, I was going to say intentionally choosing to use our bodies. Been thinking about improvisation a lot today. Are we intentionally thinking about how we're using our bodies? No, we're not thinking about it. We're just doing it. But where does that come from? Where are the impulses? And how are we navigating that as we're engaging in the work? And so thinking about what that might look like is worthwhile. The last element of the of this part, this focused instruction, is that the teacher needs to engage in what is called noticing. And so noticing is, in some ways, it can be kind of like an assessment kind of practice, but it's just taking in, as you start to see the students engaging in the work, what are you observing? Noticing and interpret students' thinking. Do they, from the looks on their faces, the nonverbal cues, does it seem like they're understanding what I'm talking about? Is there discomfort? Is there confusion? What's happening? Noticing reveals the relative effectiveness of prior instruction, sure. It informs your subsequent instructional decisions. So if I feel like the people are getting the thing, I know that I'm ready to move on, okay? Noticing is not necessarily evaluating, but rather it's just observing, listening, and using your knowledge and content of novice learners and of their likely misconceptions or partial understandings to help you scaffold student learning as you're about to transfer into guided instruction. Caitlin, not a worry, thank you for being here. Okay, and so as you all were initially showing us horrified, I'm watching what's happening to see, let me go back there. Is the facial expression thing going on? Is the gesture thing going on? Is the gaze thing going on? When I was coming up with this criteria, I was just putting notes together and preparing for the evening and what did I think would be worthwhile. And I thought, well, is gaze, like, is that something we're going to talk about right now? Okay, fine. What's that going to look like? I'm going to show this then example of this guy doing his Shakespeare, I guess, I don't know. What is that going to be? And I'm checking in with what I'm seeing on the screen when we're doing this stuff in the document, what people are typing, all of that taking in to sort of make decisions about what I'm going to do next. And noticing is just those sort of initial observations. And all of that then is the focused instruction, where the teacher is doing all of the business. Now, in our remaining moments, to spend a little bit of time just hearing about guided instruction, the idea that we're doing things and the teacher is doing them with us. And so sometimes if we're doing drama games, if we're doing warm-ups, very customary, I think, for the facilitator, the instructor to do that work with the young people, and that can be quite effective. And so guided instruction is that thing is happening. I'm getting side coaching, whatever that I'm doing as those activities are unfolding. But in addition to that, I'm implementing what in this framework are described as questions, prompts, and cues in order to, again, get the students verbalizing what their mental process is, what they're thinking about, what they're understanding about what it is that you're asking them to do. When I did that think aloud activity with you before, that is something that the teacher is supposed to do to, like, make it known to the people what's happening inside of their mind while they're engaging in that practice. You could ask the students to do that too. Okay, I did an activity with students. We were doing, it's a Boal activity called Complete the Image. And I, just as an exercise, had students saying, okay, so if the person were to start the activity in a handshake, then one person's going to step out of the handshake and they're going to look at the person who's there with their hand and they're going to make a decision about how to connect with that or how to make something new with that. So the person has their hand there. I'm going to decide that we're dancing and I'm going to put my hand on the other side of the, whatever it is. You make something new with what the person did. Then the other person steps out. They make something new with it. And we go back and forth, taking turns, making something new with whatever the physical position is that we see our partner in. So adding the think aloud to that for like the students, like talking through what is it that they're observing about their partner, and then what is the decision that they're making about how to make that new thing. Because making the new thing for some students is very overwhelming. And that they might be thinking like, I've got to create something that is like literal, like we have to be dancing, we have to be playing football, we have to be doing something that like other people are going to recognize and understand. And the reality is it doesn't have to be something literal. It could just be like, oh, there's something very interesting and wavy about what's happening in the arm with that arm. And I want to be in a wavy place with the person. So I'm going to go over and I'm going to get into a wavy place, which as I'm looking at my picture on the screen, I'm thinking, oh, that looks like I'm seeing a ghost, or I am a ghost or something. Like I can be narrative about it and literal, but I don't have to be. And if I don't sort of talk students through what's happening in my mind to make that decision, they might not even realize that that's a possibility. And so that illuminates, the multiple ways that we can interact with the material. So that's doing a think aloud as part of this guided instruction moment. Question prompts and cues are like specific strategies to find out what the student knows and what they're thinking about. So that the teacher could ask a question and the student responds. And the idea is that you're trying to get them to articulate what they're thinking about, how they're approaching doing that thing. And then I have here, what does this child's answer tell me about what they know or don't know? Asking them to elaborate or clarify their answers allows you to determine how to respond and how best to scaffold their understanding. And the alternative to scaffolding is simple correction. So you could just tell them that what they're doing is wrong and, oh, great, they can move on. But it's better to sort of draw out the knowledge and understanding and see like if there's a way in which they can articulate it themselves without you having to tell them that thing, okay? And this isn't about behavior management. What should you be doing? But rather, how much that they're understanding the concept that you're focusing on. And questions is like the starting level of that, okay? So just sort of asking the student, all right, so what's happening here in terms of facial expression? Or what does facial expression mean again? Like just asking them that foundational level, because you're observing that like, oh, they seem to be doing it very well, but are they actually able to talk about that thing? Can they demonstrate understanding in another way? Prompting the student then is that you've asked them the question and that their response was not clear or not satisfactory to what you were expecting to hear, didn't track with what you understand that concept to mean or what we have talked about as what that thing is all about. And so prompting them is then to give them a hint or a reminder that might then encourage them to sort of come to that quote unquote right answer, right definition, whatever it is, or further be able to articulate what it is that they're trying to say. So it could be phrased as a question or a statement, but the teacher does not assume the responsibility of telling them the information. So facial expression, if we're sort of in that place, then we could be saying to the folks, okay, remember we have to think about our eyes and our mouth. Is that part of it? Okay. And so it's just sort of like layering in some moments that then might get them to say something that's more fulsome, something that is more sort of on the right track as we were. This idea here that it's guiding the students' thinking. And you've asked them a question. Okay, so what is happening with facial expression or gaze? Okay, so what is gaze? Gaze is our eyes and what we're looking at. Okay, if they couldn't get that, and now you sort of prompt them, okay, so gaze is about what part of the face? Where are we? Okay, not there yet. And so now we move to a cue as the next level, which is that you're going to actually just direct them to something else. Look at what those folks are doing over there. Or if it's your own space, and so you're able to have materials on the wall. Okay, look over at that poster. Remember we did this thing? Okay, what was happening there? Okay, so you're actually physically directing their attention to something else outside of themselves that might then prompt them still to be able to, oh yeah, of course, I know what that thing is. We did it on a form. We did it on the screen. We were in this part of the room when we had that moment. That you're pointing them to something else that might sort of allow them to reconnect with and articulate whatever that idea is that you're trying to get from the folks. That may not work because maybe they just actually don't know or don't remember. And so in that case, then you're actually just going to have to tell them. But it's arriving at that point. And how do you get there? That you're trying to sort of tease it out of the person and taking different maneuvers here in order to try to get at that. Some might say, well, is it worth the time? I've only got 45 minutes, so I need to move on. Well, you could just tell them. But if you instead give them opportunities to get at it, you know, that is going to be more valuable for the people than just rushing them through. So let me, someone is unmuted. Did you have a question? So let me just walk through some of this. So here, in this idea of noticing, we have this image here of two young people. I don't know what they're doing. Okay, but there is some facial expression. There is some gesture happening. There is some gaze that's happening. I am going to zoom in on this picture so that y'all can see it better. And I'm going to ask you what you notice about their facial expression, their gesture, or their gaze. If you want to type in the chat, you may. If you want to unmute and speak, you may. Whatever is comfortable for you. What do you notice about facial expression, gesture, and gaze in this image? They're both not smiling. They don't seem to be looking at each other. So here, from these responses, my sense is that we're sort of reading the picture, like taking in the information. What is actually happening in front of us? Okay. Now then we push to, if these students in blue is staring away while the student in camouflage is staring intermittently at the other student, they're connected physically by the paper that they hold. You bet. Okay. Gazing down at the item between them. The other has a hand on their chest and is looking out. The hand on the chest. Interesting. Okay. What might that be about? That hand on the chest. I'm interested. They're holding something. Okay. So this is just sort of noticing and making sense of what it is that we're seeing. And we want to go one step further. If the idea is I've taught these people something through focused instruction about facial expression, about gesture, about gaze, are they understanding those things? And how am I going to know that? So just I see what they're doing, but now I need to hear what they're thinking about. So the first thing is questions. So if you had to check for understanding, okay, what question might you ask them about facial expression, gesture, or gaze that's going to give us information about what that student knows? What might those questions be? So again, we can post those in the chat, or we can unmute and verbalize them. What do they know about facial expression? What do they know about gesture? What do they know about gaze? I love that. Where are you looking and why are you looking there? Interesting. And putting that your gaze in parentheses is very interesting, Joanna, because I think when I'm asking a question, do I need to use the term to get the information? Or is that itself leading? Is that itself moving me into a prompt? So just by asking, where are you looking? And seeing what they respond. Do they adjust physically as a result of asking the question, or do they respond verbally? What is that? Very interesting. What is your hand not holding the object doing? What made you make that choice? Very interesting, because we see that the one actor has that hand there. I think they're carrying a sack over their shoulder. What's happening? Is it a flag? What's going on there? What is that? Interesting. The other student just has the hand at their side. Okay, interesting. What made you make that choice? And so from that idea of think alouds before, if I've modeled that for the students, why I'm making the decisions about what I'm doing, then we understand that they may have some understanding now that everything that they're doing has meaning and has a rationale behind it, has reason. And what is that? How are you engaging your eyes, mouth, cheekbones? And so now we're starting to get into the physical elements of what they're doing, okay? So prompts, if their response to those questions wasn't quite right, how can you guide their thinking without telling them the answer? So how might you prompt the student to sort of get more at what they understand about facial expression, gesture, or gaze? I mentioned already that there's elements of using the terminology that does that. My sense probably is that when you focus on the specific parts of the body, that is also sort of leading them in a way, getting us into a prompting kind of place. And so what are some other things that we might say that could prompt them to articulate their understanding of facial expression, gesture, or gaze, or not maybe just their understanding of those terms, but also some of the artistic choices that they're making, which is quite interesting. And last with cues, as I say before, if it still wasn't quite right, then what would you direct them to in order to support them? And of course, that's going to depend on the learning environment. It's going to depend on what you've engaged the folks in before and the rest. Okay. So there's just a couple of things that I want to point out to you in our remaining moments. I'm going to do that, which is just to highlight this idea of recursive action, which is that you're constantly reminding the people and giving them multiple interactions with the material in context, if we really want them to be able to sort of learn and achieve whatever that purpose is that we've outlined for them at the beginning, that we're reviewing things with them. I mean, in other content areas, we're preparing for the test, but here it's just that we're making it worthwhile. We've taken the time to engage in these activities with this material, and so certainly we want folks to take that with them in some capacity. And the more opportunities that we have to revisit, to remind, to review, the more likelihood that would be. And then this last piece, which is always such a mess for me in these moments, all lessons should end with some sense of what we've learned and how it connects to what we're doing. And so certainly back in our document that we started working in earlier, we had this KWL that we had, what we knew, what we wanted to know. And this last column here then is what we've learned. If there's things that you've learned tonight, if there's things that you're taking away, if there's questions that you still have, but that you are interested in finding out more about in the future, then that would go there in the L column when you're working in that document. I can post there again for you if that is helpful. While that is happening, I did want to say, I just did this. Here I have a slide and I've just done it. I mentioned before that I do have this book coming out. I'm supposed to tell people about it. So Assessment in the Drama Classroom, and certainly this framework for the gradual release of responsibility is one of the ideas that I touch upon throughout the book and relate to the ideas of assessment that I have posted there. If you use the QR code that's on your screen, that will take you directly to the page. I offer apologies. It was not my intention that this book would be so expensive, but the book publisher didn't even ask and didn't care what I thought about that. So apologies. The money isn't going to me. Unfortunately, it's going to them. But I am hopeful that will be a useful resource for you. And I hope that you will join us again for one of these Theater in Our Schools events as we go forward. Okay. Email me if you have questions, if you want to continue this dialogue or talk about other things, or otherwise, I'm really glad that you were able to be here tonight, and I hope to see you again.